Now, what may seem strange is that everything that you see on stage right now, all this stuff, the speakers, the soundboard, the guitars, the pedal boards, the mic stands, speaker stands, all of this stuff basically fits right down here in this little corner of, I guess this is supposed to be our dining room. So yeah, everything fits right here. So let's start loading up the car. One little trick that I recommend is I've got my speaker stands in this bag here, but you'll see I've got my mic stands, 2 mic stands, and 2 guitar stands. I'm playing acoustic and electric today. What I do is I place them on top of this little bag. This is an on-stage bag, and just carry everything like that and load it. This prevents me from, of course, having to carry all this stuff one by one. So just a little tip there that'll save you some time and effort. I didn't actually plan on making this part of the video, but I figured, hey, I'm showing you guys how to set everything up on stage. Might as well show you how I load everything, because that's actually a big component, loading and unloading. So what I have here, I've got a small SUV. This is a 2013 Nissan Rogue, not a very big vehicle. I've got a table in here that I set my board and all that stuff on. What I do is I load my speakers in first, and again, depending on your vehicle, it may be different for you, but hopefully this might help some of you. So I've got these speakers here. I've got 2 12-inch speakers. What are these? Electro Voice. So I load one in first like this. Slide it all the way back, and then I'll take my second speaker and I'll load it in facing the other speaker here. So it fits in nice and snug, just like that. Next, I've got the suitcase here that fits my board. It's just a Mackie Pro FX 10V, V10, something like that. I'm actually going to show this to you up close when we get on stage, but I've got all of my electronics in this suitcase right here, most of them anyway, so this is going to fit right beside my speakers. Next, I got my little Pod Go bag, the Line 6 Pod Go. You guys know I just bought this unit about 2 weeks ago here. And this is what I'm using for both my acoustic and electric sounds. This little thing prevents me from having to have 2 separate units for acoustic and electric because it works for both. Again, another time saver. I also carry an extra extension cord, and I've got one of these other cords here. I've got some other cables I'll show you when we get on stage as well, some power cables that I use as well. And this, what I showed you earlier, this is all my mic stands, my guitar stands, and the speaker stands here. This is actually a lot of equipment in one little section right here, one little piece. I just throw this in the back seat. The most important piece of gear that you do not want to forget is a tip bucket. Always bring a tip bucket, and of course we'll have some signs and all that good stuff too. Now the guitars, that's actually the last thing I'll load up, and I'll throw those in the back seat. I've got another probably hour before we leave for the gig, so I'll put those in right before we leave. I just don't like leaving them in the humidity. I'm in Florida. It's, even though it's in October, it's still hot. I'm starting to sweat. I'm gonna have to rinse off after I load up. The last tip I want to share before we hit the road and head to this gig is make sure any components that need to be charged are, well, charged before you go to the gig. Like my wireless, it is all charged up, ready to go, and of course I have to have an iPad because I'm playing a lot of cover songs and I can't remember lyrics to save my life. I even forget my own lyrics sometimes. I play a couple originals as well. So alright, let's head off to the gig. We're packed up and we're on our way to Keel and Curly Winery. Now this, real quick, is one of my wife and I's absolute favorite places just to go hang out. They've got really good wine, good food, and a huge stage, which you're about to see. And I'm going to take you through the process here of just how I set everything up piece by piece, and I really do hope this video helps you, so let's get set up. Alright, so the car is unloaded and you can see all the gear. What I do is I set everything kind of in one spot here as I'm unloading, so everything goes there, and you can see the size of this stage. It's pretty big. This stage is meant for really full bands, and it's just me, and of course my wife is going to sing on a couple songs too, so we've got a lot of room to work with, which can be good and can be bad sometimes, because you know, as a solo gig you kind of want to be close to everything, like the board and that sort of thing, so you can make adjustments while you're playing. But we'll get all this sorted out, so let's start setting up. The first thing I do is I like to set up my speaker stands. I've got two main speakers that you're about to see in a second here, and I like to set those up first. Now these are on stage speaker stands, and what I like to do is kind of assess the height. And I've played this venue several times already, so I kind of know what height I want it at. And what I do is I just count how many holes you can see here. I just count down, like for this particular gig, I like to have it on about 4 holes, so I know where to put the pin in every single time. And this is kind of the standard height that I found that works best for me. You know, you kind of have to adjust that as you go when you do your sound check to see what sounds best for that venue. Now, when I'm setting up my second speaker stand, you'll notice that I'm going to set it up right beside the first one. You're like, wait a minute, what are you doing, dude? This doesn't make any sense. The reason why I do this is because I can assess the height of the other speaker stand and get these level here, okay? I'll get them level just like that, so that way, you know, they're pretty close to the same height here. You can do it a lot easier setting them up together like this than obviously setting one up here and then setting the other one up across the stage. So once we get those set up, it's time to put the speakers on. Now with the speakers, the first thing you have to do, at least on these particular speakers, is there's a little knob that you need to twist, because this kind of helps lock it into the pole. Make sure that's loose, because if not, when you go to put the speaker up on the stand, you won't be able to, because that little screw is going to block it. So loosen that up first, just a little tip I learned after about the 3rd time. So then once you've got it in there, you'll want to tighten that up. Now these speakers, these are the Electro Voice ZLX 12BT speakers. They're 1,000 watts each, which is, and they're powered, by the way, of course, 1,000 watts powered each. And of course, that's plenty of wattage for a venue like this, probably for most any solo gig or even like a small band. Normally now, if I'm playing smaller venues, I may only use one of these speakers for the main, and I might use the other one as the monitor, which we'll get to the monitor a little later. Alright, next I want to set the table up that I'm going to put all of my my board and some other stuff, my laptop if I'm bringing that. And I bring a table, I always bring a table, I recommend you do as well. However, they had an extra table sitting up here, so I'm like, hey, I'll just use their table, and that'll just be one less piece of equipment that I have to set up for myself. Now once we have our speakers set up, they're on the stands, we've got the table out, we can now set up our soundboard, and here we've got the Mackie Pro FX 10 V3. Cool little soundboard here, and what we want to do at this point is make sure that we have power. So I've got this Fishman power strip, and this has proven to be a really handy little device in my live setup here. It's got a really long cord here, so you've got plenty of length, and there's 6 outlets. I actually have 2 of these, and you'll see why in a second. So I want to go ahead and set that up, and after that, of course, we're going to start running power to the board and also to our mains, our speakers that we have set up. Normally what I'll do is I'll connect my speakers, I'll run the power cables from the speaker to the strip there, and of course then I'll do the same thing to the board there. And here I've only got one of them set up. Once I get the board plugged in, I've got the speaker plugged in, I've only got one speaker set up, and this is enough to assess whether or not I have power. And again, that's one of the first things you want to do when you get the board set up and your speakers, or at least one speaker, set those up and just make sure you have power. So what I have to do at this point in this particular gig is, of course, I have to connect power to the other speaker that we have set up. And what I had to do in this case is I had to use another extension cord, because this is a large stage. So, you know, the speakers are going to be a little further apart. So I actually had to bring another extension cord, which you saw earlier, that green cord that I brought that you saw in the beginning of the video, and that's how we connected power to that speaker. Now once we know we have power, I'm going to go ahead and run my cables going from the board to the monitors, because the next thing we want to do after that is, okay, we've got power, but now we need to make sure we actually have sound. So I do that next. So our soundboard's connected to our speakers and we've got power. So now it's time to start setting the stage. So I go ahead at this point and I set up the mic stands here. We've got a couple different mic stands, got it on stage, and I've got, I think it's the ultimate mic stand or something like that. My wife actually sings with me on a few songs, so I'm setting her mic stand up as well. And then of course we'll go ahead and get the mics, and here you can see I've got this iPad holder. As we mentioned in the beginning of the video, I don't always remember lyrics. I'm getting better at that. But I do use an iPad because again, I'm playing a lot of cover songs, 3 hours of cover songs and throwing in a few originals here and there as well. But I get everything set up, get the mics set up on the stands, and at that point I'm going to start running the mic cables to each mic there and get those plugged into the board. And while we're doing that, that's a good idea to go ahead and check one of the mics as soon as you get one of the mics plugged in, to go ahead and do a quick sound check. Again, you've got power, but let's go ahead at this point and make sure that we've actually got sound. You want to kind of test things along the way so that you don't get everything set up and then find that there's a problem and then you're not sure where to tie that back to. And by the way, the mics we are using here, I've got the Shure SM58, which I use, and then we've got the Shure Beta 58A, which that's the one my wife is using. We also have a backup, the Shure SM57. You always want a backup. Now, a quick note on the microphone. So this board has a high Z option, so we plug the mics into those channels. I know some people like to use direct boxes, but this board has the high Z, 2 high Z inputs, so we just use that, and that works just fine for us. Now, the other output source that you want is a monitor. You do need some kind of monitor, especially on a stage like this big, when the speakers are kind of far from you. You're not gonna be able to hear yourself, so we actually don't have a monitor right now. I need to get one, but right now we're just using this small little amp, and it seems to work okay for what I need it for now. And I know some solo artists don't even use a monitor when they're on stage. If I'm playing smaller gigs, which a lot of them are smaller, I'll just use one speaker as the main and just use the second speaker as my monitor, and that works just fine. Now it's time to set up the instruments. So here I've got the Pod Go, the Line 6 Pod Go. Just got this thing a couple of weeks ago, and this will be the second gig that I've used this. Now I use a separate looper pedal, and I'll get into why, because the Pod Go has its looper. I'll get into why I use a separate looper pedal in another video, so that will be coming up soon. I also have another Fishman power strip that I run here because I needed a few extra outlets. I've got the Ditto pedal, the looper pedal, and the Pod Go. So I've got that separate power strip there, and of course the monitor as well. That one needs power too. So we've got 2 Fishman power strips that we're using here. So we run the cables that we need for this, and then I go ahead and plug this in to my 3rd channel in this case there, just using the 1/4 inch cable. Now, one important thing when you're running a guitar or any kind of instrument and you've got effects, you want to make sure the effects on the board is off for that channel, because you probably don't want the reverb or delay or whatever onboard effects you're using. You probably don't want that mixed in with the effects that you're using in if you have an effects processor or amp or whatever. So just make sure that's off if that's what you want. So at this point we're moving right along. It is time to break out the axes, the guitars. So again, in this case I'm using acoustic and electric. So I've got 2 stands here. I've got one really good stand, this Hercules stand, and I've got another cheap stand. I need to get another good stand because, accidents can happen on those cheaper stands there. But anyway, so I break out my acoustic and then I break out my electric. I've got the Takamine G series, and then I've got my good old Ibanez Prestige RG1570. That's the guitars that we're going to be playing for this gig. And lastly here, I'm going to go ahead and test and make sure that my wireless is working here. Remember, we talked about charging those components that need to be charged before the gig. So we know that's charged up, so I'm just going to plug in my wireless. This is the Boss WL20L that we have here. And what's cool is I can plug the sending signal into the Pod Go here, and then the receiving end I can just plug that back and forth between guitars. Now after everything is set up, you do want to do a sound check, and this is where having some people there at your gig can help out a little bit, because you want to just make sure it's not too loud, not too soft, and of course the amount of people that are going to be in the room, which you can see there's a big crowd here today, that's going to impact the sound as well as like this is kind of like an outdoor gig versus being inside indoors, whether that's a large room or small room or such. So it's just good to have someone that can check the sound for you and to make sure your levels are even.
Everything starts to change. Can you help me find that place where we were kings of the world? I felt alive, lost my way, and I don't know how to end. It's not anymore. Everything's
All right, guys, thank you. That's it for me today. Again, my name is Jason Stallworth. I'm coach up here.
Let's run through a quick recap of setting up for your live solo gig, or really any gig where there's a duo or even a small band. But real quick, I want to give a huge shout out to the folks and the owner of Keel and Curly Winery in Plant City. I absolutely love playing there, and like I said in the beginning, this is one of my wife and I's favorite places just to go hang out. They've got awesome wine, craft beer, awesome food, just a really cool and relaxed atmosphere and great staff. So thank you folks if you're watching this. And I'll leave a link to Keel and Curly's website in the description of this video, so if you're ever in the area, definitely go check them out. It's an awesome place. On that note, make sure you're following me on my social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. I'm always posting my live schedule there, so if you're in this area or you're coming to visit, you'll definitely want to check that out and of course come out and see and hear me play. Those links are in the description of this video as well. So the first thing I like to do is just get everything from the car unloaded first. I usually place everything in kind of one spot or just wherever, but the point is I unload everything from the car, and that avoids any trips going back and forth after that, so that way you can just focus on setting up. Everything's on the stage and you can just start setting up. Next, I like to get these speaker stands set up first, and what I usually do is I'll set them up together, close together, so that I can assess the height to make sure that's level for both stands if you're using two stands, two main speakers there. Again, sometimes I'll only use one main speaker if it's a smaller venue, and I'll use my second speaker as a floor monitor, kind of like put that up as a wedge. So once we get the speakers on the stands, it's time to set up the soundboard so that way you can run power to both at least one of your speakers and the soundboard and assess power. You want to make sure you have power. That's usually the first thing I like to do. Of course, you got to get something set up before you do that, so getting at least one speaker and getting the board set up so you know you've got power, you run your strips and all that, that's the golden ticket to the rest of the setup going smoothly. After that, you want to run your speaker cables from the speakers to the soundboard, get those connected. Of course, the next natural step after that is to set up your microphones and then run those cables to the soundboard, and then you can do a sound test after that. So you know you've got power, that's important. Next, you want to make sure you've got sound coming out of those monitors. You want to make sure all of that stuff works before moving forward. Next, you can start setting up your instruments. And if you're a guitar player like me, you probably have some pedal boards that you're setting up. So you want to get all of those connected and get that connected to the board. And of course, you want to go ahead and start testing your sound there as well. Now in my case, I have a wireless, and I think a lot of you probably use wireless. If you don't, I highly recommend getting some sort of wireless system because it just gives you a little bit more freedom to move around on stage when you want. You don't have to worry about the cable being in the way, stepping on it, and all that good stuff. So the wireless is just a really good way to go. Just don't forget to charge that before the gig, along with an iPad if you're like me and you need that iPad for lyrics because you forget lyrics like I do. Make sure those things are charged up before you go to that gig. And if at all possible, it's good to have someone that can kind of walk around out in the audience just so you can do a sound check, not only to make sure that it's loud enough or not too loud, but also make sure that your levels are even, that your vocals aren't overpowering your instrument and vice versa. Now understand that that may change. The volume level may change as the room fills up, or if it's not as empty, if you're playing outside versus playing inside, the size of that room or building that you're in. So these are things that you'll just have to assess at every gig. And for me, what works even better is I keep my levels the same on the board as far as the mix goes, so that the only thing I really ever have to change is the overall master volume. And again, that's going to be determined by the venue, the size, whether I'm inside, outside, or the amount of people. So all of these things can impact where your volume levels need to be at. And the most important thing, actually there's two I'm going to share with you. One you already know, we already covered this. Don't forget your tip jar, because people will tip you. Set that in a strategic place where people are walking by, where the most traffic is going to be going in and out, mainly out, because they're going to see that as they're leaving, like, okay, yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer to tip this person because they're providing entertainment and they sound good and all that good stuff. It's also important to have some sort of sign. I'm going to get a bigger sign, but in this case, I've just got a little sign here with my QRC code that goes to my website. So if they want to leave tips online, virtual tips, or just go check out my own music or anything that I want people to check out, they can just, hover their phone over that QRC code and that will come up. Lastly, make sure you're having a good time up there. Have fun with this. Don't overthink it. Don't over stress about it, because that can be a challenge for us musicians. We want to sound phenomenal. We want everything to be perfect, but just get up there and have a good time. Don't be stressed, because the audience, they will get that from you. You want to get up there with this mindset of, you know what, I'm here to provide entertainment for you. We're going to have an awesome time, and don't be afraid to interact with the crowd. Actually, I encourage that. Make sure you ask, hey, are there any birthdays to celebrate? Are there any weddings or engagements or divorce parties? Hey, that's a thing too. So just interact with the crowd. Sometimes I'll play a song that maybe people haven't heard in a very long time. For example, I play a cover of Real Life's Send Me an Angel, and I'll ask a trivia question. I'll say, hey, after I played this song, you've got to name the movie this was from, but don't Google it. That's cheating. So I'll do something like that. And of course, that song is from the movie Rad. I think it was 82, 83, something like that. The BMX freestyle movie, which is a really killer movie. So that's one of those tunes that they're really gonna have to think about. So it just kind of gets them engaged. It's a way to engage the audience and just help them have an even better time than they came there to have. You're gonna be part of that. So it's just an awesome thing to do. Guys, leave me any questions in the comments. I'm gonna be writing up a blog post on this as well at some point. So when that's available, I'll have that link in the description of this video. And of course, don't forget to check out the description of this video. I've got links in there, again, going to Keel and Curly, the venue that we played at here, which was very awesome. I've also got links to my social media. Don't forget to follow that. And I've got some other good stuff where you can listen to my music and, of course, sign up for my guitar courses and things like that. So check those out. And again, leave me any questions that you have. If there's something I missed and you have a question, leave that in the comments. I'm happy to chime in and respond to that. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope this helped you. I hope this kind of helps fill in the blanks and just helps you have a smoother process of setting up for live gigs. So I'll see you on the next video. Until then, as we always say on this channel, keep it metal, or sometimes keep it 80s.